It is time to move into the greater self to reclaim it. Humanity needs now to reclaim its sovereignty. Only in this way will humanity step into its rightful future. The new world awaits a new sovereign human being. It's time to own your sovereignty. I mean, they're basic words, okay? Nothing like hard to sort of fathom, but when you read that and when you see it again and again, you realize that
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. So John Nolan here, and look who's with me for the 10th edition of the Naked Truth Show. My co-host, Frank Jacob. It's good to see you, brother.
10x, it's X.
It's X.
We've matched them finally.
You know,
hey,
Frank,
bro, I'm back. How good to see you.
It's wonderful to see you, brother. You look great, refreshed. I know you're working a lot, but I also feel the enthusiasm. I'm excited that we're doing this Naked Truth thing. It's always something I look forward to. I know the audience does. So, what have you been up to? You're now, I said this in the last year. You're part of this quartet at the Arlington Institute. You're having great discussions over there. You're touring in Germany, and you're doing these seminars, and of course your online work. So, what's happening in your world, brother?
Well, that's kind of a good nutshell of it. I mean, starting right at the top, what you said about, feeling good, even though, that we tend to cover a lot of darker issues, the dark side, the deep end, and whatever you want to call it, right? And most people look at this, there's this sort of this gist out there, the saying that if you associate or get into the dark stuff, that you're going to make that real, right? You're going to manifest that in your world, or you're going to bring like resonance. You're going to attract that into your world, like according to the law of attraction. But I'd have to counter that and say that the way you overcome that is, when I'm very enthusiastic about the fact that I'm able to get out there in front of an audience. I'm one of the privileged few, and I definitely do not take it for granted that for some reason I get invited to Quartet. I get invited to Arlington. We have our show. People paid money to come see me talk live at a workshop. I mean, I just had one on the weekend. But I mean, that's a privilege for me to be able to bring this intense information out there, because I'm fully 100% convinced that the only way that we can, return to, our kind of gist of, or an idea of sovereignty is if we confront the illusions that are out there. We cut through all this, fog of deception. And I love to pick out the deception and give the little nuggets in digestible format to whoever I'm presenting them to. So that's what I've been doing, more of. And I hope I can continue doing it as long as I want. And that's hope in the positive sense, because that's one of the amazing things that we have as human beings, is we have the ability to have hope. And but if we have to, not confuse that with something else that's out there that is similar to a drug. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit today as well.
Yeah, I'd love that. And speaking to this idea that you said, that when you look at this dark stuff, and I've said this over and over again, mostly depends on who you are while you're doing it. If you're in a state of despair and you've a lot of problems going on, I wouldn't recommend to go into these rabbit holes, because you're not going to be able to have any positive impact. It's only going to bring you down further. But if your intention is to shine a light and be the light going in there and sort of blowing it wide open, because you have a vision of a different future, a vision of a different way of life, well, that's your driver then, right? So then you're creating that, and that's just a part of the journey. And what I felt I'd love to open with you today, Frank, is something we have touched on a lot, and something that a number of people is talking about, but not nearly enough, which is this looming new system on the horizon, fully implemented new, I shall say. It's been on the rise, but which is called, for all intents and purposes, technocracy. You and I talk about it, but I think most people still don't really know what that is, how it's replacing any other systems, and how it is sort of the end goal and always has been. What's your take? Where are we in that journey of awareness, and what's happening in the implementation of technocracy?
Well, technocracy is something which actually is a social movement. It's actually something which isn't new to our time. In fact, it goes back, actually, if you really start to dig into the origins of it, it goes back into into Canada in the 1930s. So here we are in 2025. We're just around the corner from 100 years that technocracy idea, that vision, which the technocrats of that day had, which was basically the idea that they wanted to build a system of scientific control over society. And I think it had to do with the fact that science was making great strides forward. Quantum physics and things were coming up, right? And all these new ideas, and it gave people the idea that the solution was going to be a technical one, a scientific one, and that science was going to help us to sort out the illusions that we have with respect to reality, what we think is real. And I can understand how there's a certain appeal to that, for sure, because all of us, like you and I, are both musicians. And when I was a musician, I started off playing. What did I start off with? Actually, I started off playing the saxophone, with totally analog instrument. And then I moved. Eventually, I saw some band at our school concert, and like a rock band playing live, and I fell in love with the idea of playing drums, and I switched over to drums. And I played drums in bands, and you started to, back then. What did you have to record and to capture your rehearsals with? You either had nothing, or you had a cassette recorder.
A cassette recorder,
right?
Yeah, tape recorder.
Right, a cassette, a 2-track cassette, or 4-track, 2 sides, like I need 2 ways, right? A stereo cassette recorder. And if you had some money, you could buy a 4-track cassette recorder, so you could record all in one direction on four tracks, just like the Beatles did in the 60s, on a micro format, right? And so when technology then suddenly, and you were always frustrated, of course, by how limited it was, and the sound quality, etc. And then when digital came, and I had the complete pleasure of being, and I'm sure, and you belong probably to that too. We were part of that generation that still at the tail end caught that analog stuff moving into the digital world. And it was like we saw the entire move into it.
Brother, when I started writing songs, I'm just want to tell you how real this is to me. I remember at home we had this laundry basket, that had a cover, and there was a hole in the cover that you could sort of push the dirty laundry through into the basket. So I would put some t-shirts in that hole so I could set the microphone in there properly, and then I would sit around that, and the microphone was attached to the tape recorder, and then I would write, the songs I'd written, I would record, and then I would stick them in the cassette player, and just be freaked out about being able to record that at home. I was excited, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is exciting, right? And so, but the thing is, and then you're just like, well, all of a sudden, all these new possibilities opened up when digital happened. And so I went the full gamut, from really in my parents' basement with cassette recorders, or rehearsals at some rehearsal space that we found somewhere, all the way to working in studios with the state-of-the-art Pro Tools, digital's first generation Pro Tools, digital recording system on a computer. And believe me, that was like heaven to you, right? So anyway, all I'm saying here is that the idea of technology in itself is not bad, and it would definitely have an appeal to people, just like it was an appeal to me that technology was going to improve something, right? And so that was like 100 years ago. Well, not 100 years in our case, it wasn't, but 100 years ago, the technocracy movement. I think I may even have a slide on that. Let me see if I find that. Yeah, here it is. There's the definition, and there was a magazine called the Technocrats, right?
Yeah.
And what's really funny with technocracy is that, well, guess who was into technocracy in Canada? Elon Musk's granddad.
Yeah.
So is it any great surprise to us, right, that the great Elon Musk, with a capital G, his grandfather was part of the technocrats in Canada 100 years ago, and that his father, of course, inheriting that mindset, passed it along to his son, who then, became one of the founders of PayPal, and lo and behold, became the richest man on the effing planet. Right. So you have that whole backdrop, and now you have that same character who is literally de facto, I call him the president of the United States, because come on, let's be honest here, John. Right? I don't think that
I think
Donald.
he's the handler.
I think that, yeah, I mean, okay, there's those definitions which are interesting. We can go into some of them too. They definitely apply, right? Because the handlers brought in another fanboy of Elon, or actually a partner of Elon's in PayPal called Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel, what did he bring in? Well, he brought in, the little protege that he made, a made man called JD Vance, right? So now JD Vance is the VP, and and the guy who made him his best buddy, or at one point at least, Elon, is literally de facto the thinker in the presidency. And the old goat, Donald J. Trump, he's, what is he now, 89 or something like that, or he certainly acts like it. But he doesn't have all his marbles. He doesn't have the fresh energy, the juice. He doesn't have the neural network to really compete with this young generation of technocrats. But he's smart enough to identify that those guys have got the juice, and those guys have the money, and that's the important factor. And those guys are, telling him what the future is going to be. So what is Donald Trump going to say? Of course, he's going to say, "Yeah, this is it. And he's going to listen. He's got his ear. Elon has Donald's ear, and it's pretty much clear to us that whatever Elon tells Donald to do, Donald kind of promptly complies. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, what I do think is that even I think even Elon is handled, but maybe in a different way, because I don't see him as a full human being. He's certainly the frontman for this entire conglomerate that he pretends to run on a daily basis, which is impossible, while he tweets 20 times or 30 times a day. We run a very, very small operation here, tiny. Shit, I cannot tweet 5 times a day if I want to run this thing, even if I tried. So, but I think he's handled, and we're going into both technology and interdimensional forces, I believe, when we really look at it. But yeah, however, it's done like you say, because what I think is what they gave to the administration is sort of a bulletproof algorithm, and that algorithm kind of lets them know what to say, when to say it, and how to act, even if it looks weird to us, but it works on the people and on the segments that need the manipulation. So I think that's the winning thing is the algorithm is already running the show. And it's running it, I think, through Elon to the president's desk. That's sort of the chain of, and so to me, it's already an algorithmic reality that we're living in. It's a curated reality. And we had a little bit of a discussion before, because you asked me, how's it in the States? Is it a state of euphoria? I said,
Yeah.
not really. On the streets, there's no euphoria. In the markets, there's really no euphoria. Online, there's a certain level of euphoria, but that's fully curated. It's a fully curated thing, right? So I agree with you in terms of your observations. It's literally what seems to be playing out here.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting idea of the algorithm driving the politics, because it makes a lot of sense since Elon, Elon is a believer in the algorithm. And, we saw him pivot, right? I think maybe a dozen years ago or less, he was talking about how we needed to stop AI. And he was an anti, he was like, he wasn't a pro, he was a con AI. And he was involved nonetheless in developing AI, and he could see where it was leading. And then I think a lot of people remember when there was this moment where all of a sudden he pivoted back the other way, and he did a switch. And all of a sudden it was like, I think it was on a Joe Rogan show, and he'd had one too many puffs of a marijuana cigarette. And he started talking about, throwing in the towel and accepting the fact that AI is going to essentially take over. And so, being somebody who works on the levels of development in the inner circle of those technologies where algorithms reign, your observation is totally on the money. Algorithms are ruling right now, and we've heard Yuval Harari and people like that talk about algorithms and AI shaping the social norms of the future. So that, and of course, one of the most obvious places for AI to enter the social domain in the world and interact with, via algorithms with a greater population is through politics. And the idea that AI and in the spirit of technocracy is a technology which is going to be able to streamline and make government more efficient is something which they're selling hardcore at us right now. It's almost as if, John, we never, as a society of humans, it's amazing how we were able to function before AI came along, wouldn't you say?
That's what baffles me so often is like, all of us that are capable of having this conversation today in some depth are old enough to remember a life where we had none of that available. We were able to make our choices, and we were able to make good choices, create good lives, have good relationships, healthier often than now. And but I want to quickly reiterate that point, because while you were talking, it became so clear to me that the way that this works, I think, is not openly. So I don't think that, for example, Trump in the Oval Office necessarily realizes that what he's being whispered, what he's getting, is was decided by an algorithm. It's Elon giving him an idea, he's throwing it out, and next thing he knows is there's a higher approval rating, and next thing he knows is people are cheering, and he goes, "Oh, what else do you have to say?" Elon, meanwhile, is fully connected to the algorithm that dictates this show. To what end, right? And that's the question here. What's the goal? What is the algorithm's goal? How is it programmed? And I believe it's programmed to full technocracy. That's its goal, is to implement that system. What do you think?
Well, it's absolutely, if you look at the what led up to the led up before the elections, and you were looking at what all the politicians were talking about, and you realize that this idea of when Thiel came into the picture and brought in JD Vance, you end up having Trump backing people that are all about I like biometric IDs, right? Requiring electronic ear tags for cattle, for example, right? Where they were, it's because they said they had to, because it was basically, it's the best way to stay on top of like left leaning stuff like anti agricultural climate policies. So they would try to spin it in that direction. So it's funny, whoever is speaking about it with regard to technology, if they're on the left, they spin it one way, and if they're on the right, they spin it another way, and both of them are, in a sense, spinning it in the same direction. It's going into the same place. It's just they're figuring out, what are the slogans that appeal best to the people that they think are listening still. Where is that going to lead? And even I remember I found this little article about right here that says Trump's biometric system was brought in by Peter Thiel, and it's all about U.S. surveillance. And what is it with respect to Trump? It has to do with the border, the border patrol, right? They want to stop the border from being infiltrated. So, hey, there's a great justification here for bringing in the need for AI surveillance systems. I think originally they're going to be drone-like systems, and eventually the long-range plan, and it's not even that long range, we're talking just a few, maybe a half a dozen or less years, they're talking about introducing the biometric personal identification for every single person, and they're going to be doing it under the guise of state security, border security, and of course, in terms of health, it's very dangerous, because they're going to tell us that only, by keeping on track of who's been vaccinated, for example, will they be able to know where the potential outbreaks could take place, right? And what did they have? They even had Larry Ellison in the White House, in that first week that he was in the White House.
First
First
day,
day, right? And he and then same with Sam Altman, right? All these people were paraded in, and these are all the kingpins of the AI technocracy, telling us the glory of AI being able to develop vaccines for you personally that are going to go into your system and kill cancer. I mean, come on, like that is like, if that's about the phoniest used car sales pitch that I've ever heard, especially if you know anything about viruses and how diseases work. But because most people do not know they don't even know where their kidneys are located for the most part in their body, and how things work, what the liver's for and all these parts, what's the pancreas for. They don't even know that, but they'll quickly adopt what a totally non-doctor, non-biologically whole individual like Larry Ellison and I don't want to judge him completely, but come on, let's face it, he's not interested in biology. He's interested in selling technocracy, and for him to sell that to us is a very low blow, because it's an opiate for people who are fearful of diseases because they don't understand their body. And one of the most feared diseases out there, we all know, obviously, is cancer. With the rate, I think 1 in 5 women now in America are getting breast cancer. I mean, it's shocking, right? I mean, look, people are so afraid of reality right now. I even read a statistic the other day that in Seattle, they did a survey, and I think 33% of women between the ages of 18 and 35 are on some kind of mind-altering antidepressant opiates from the pharmaceutical corporations. I mean, what do you think? Isn't that like scary? These are the women in the prime of their lives, starting, right?
They're in prime. They would be in their childbearing years. And fertility rates, of course, have gone down so much. They're also in a severe state of mature menopause, which has been accelerated in the last 5 years. We know why. There's only one thing that has significantly, or let's say two things, EMFs and the medical intervention. That's really changed. So so we have that factor. But I can tell you this from observation: the real number is much higher because of the incredible black market for any kind of antidepressant drugs that are being sold on the street and whatnot. I think we're looking at way over half of the population that is on some sort of mind altering drug on a daily basis, or at least regularly. So you have and you have already, you see it in traffic, you see it everywhere. You have a sort of the early stages of a zombification or biorobotic stage. Alarming, because it when you are spirited and aware, and you're alive, it really jumps at you, and like in a scary way, how little life there is in those people. They're literally like robots walking around, so that is very observable.
That's when I was in I think I remember when I was living in Houston I lived in Houston for a time, and I read a stat that I think with respect to Prozac, which is a very popular mind altering mood enhancer, let's just call it that, 17 million people were taking it. I think that was in 99 or 2000 or something around that time, not much over 20 years ago. But I remember remarking to myself back then, saying that that's almost like 5 to 10% of the population. Like, look, Prozac's only one of, I think, 70 different, or more of those different mind enhancing, or let's say not mind enhancing, actually the opposite, mood enhancing drugs that are out there. So I remember back then remarking that, whoa, that's really scary. That means that when you're walking down the street, that literally every other person now that is there, they're looking at you through a fog. Like, I mean, they're completely tuning out reality. They're just like, they have to be, because look, if you're on this stuff, I don't know I've never taken them. I don't really know how you feel, but I've had my dabbles with smoking a joint, or hash, or even mushrooms or whatever. You do that and you realize that when you're in those states, you're not connected to, you're connected to something totally different. Now, in the course of a shamanic practice, these are, using entheogens to reach altered states and have experiences and bring something valuable back. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are doing those things habitually. And they used to freak me out because, even friends, they would just be, on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Like, when you're doing that, it's like you can pretty much count out the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Because even if you're not on a high at that moment, it peaks out after an hour or whatever, 20 minutes. And then afterward, you just kind of like, you're in a zombie state.
Baked. I mean, literally baked brain.
You're
There's not
baked.
much. It's very slowed down, very blah. So I always, and this, thankfully, in sort of the truth and freedom community, was a time where a lot of people used it. And we also have to take into account that the plant itself had been modified so much that any
Right.
positive consciousness expanding properties were taken out, unconscious. They didn't want that in people. So now they give you a head high, they give you a very relaxed state, but people are not really having any consciousness enhancing or expanding experiences anymore, because the plant And once it was modified, it was okay to bring it officially into
Right.
the legal realm, not
Well, yeah,
before.
haven't we noticed that now, like, everywhere it's being legalized?
Of course, because
Right? Well, what is that all about, right? What do you think? Why do you think they're suddenly legalizing it, right? I mean, look, alcohol's already been out there, right? I mean, that's bad enough, right? But here they now have this, and it's like, if you want to be able to sustain a a simulated version of reality, and I think we agree on that for sure. The simulated version of reality is the version that isn't real. You call it prime earth, there's other names for it, but it's the actual real communication with living matter, with living intelligence, like with the animistic reality, that the part that shamans get deeply into and report back to us with. We can all access that, but if we're all zoned out and we don't have any shamanic training and we
Mhm.
don't even care about that, then we're just in that limbo zone all the time. It's the perfect place to be if you want to sell people the straw man politics, like we talked at the beginning of the show, right? It's like the whole world is turned into a straw man politics show,
Uh,
based on the idea of the straw man argument.
I wanted to touch on one other aspect of the technocracy, because when we think of other forms of government, whether that's communism or whether that's democracy or constitutional republic, even, you don't think as these things as having anything to do with spiritual or religion necessarily. These are forms of government, right? And the technocracy is softly introduced through this idea, oh, AI, government's going to be streamlined through AI, there's going to be more efficiency, as sort of a new addition to the form of government. But Elon let it slip in an interview with Jordan Peterson, of all people, who is, presenting himself as this, super Christian. Let it slip in an interview, and they were talking about the new super center and the new supercomputer center in Memphis, and and then in Memphis, oh, the old capital of Egypt, and then Elon let it slip. Yeah, maybe Memphis is where our new God will be coming from. And Jordan Peterson just sort of kind of just let it slide. I was like, aren't you like a devout Christian? Aren't you supposed to say something here? He didn't. And that's the idea, is that we don't understand yet that technocracy is supposed to be this all encompassing system where you also have the digital godhead,
Yeah.
that will be sort of worshipped, like, or is supposed to be worshipped like today people are worshiping their deities or their god. What do you see on that front?
Well, it fits, because I think that, well, first of all, I look at Peterson as another one of these kind of inserted
Of course.
personalities, right? And you've got the whole, really the whole blogosphere, for the most part, is contaminated with inserted, social models, right? You've got the hardcore Christian type, like, and he sort of tries to kind of straddle that, but he's also a kind of a psychologist type, so it's a little bit mental and it appeals to that crowd, right? But the fact that they don't go the full distance and break it down completely is the dead giveaway, that they never actually reveal what's behind the curtain. They go up to the curtain, and and a guy like Peterson will probably give a guy like Elon Musk, first of all, leeway, because he's the god of the Trump administration kind of new guy, but secondly because he probably doesn't really understand. I mean, I don't know how much he really understands what's coming with respect to the technology. So, for him, it's kind of a mysterious area. So he can't jump in and have an argument with Elon, because the only way you could have an interesting argument with Elon is if you were on top of not just the kind of, at least a certain level of understanding of the state of the art with respect to AI and where it's going, but also had a grasp of kind of spiritual definitions and what AI symbolizes in terms of society and the social norms out there. If you don't have a grasp of that topic either, then you're going to be quickly bowled over. And I think he's too big of an ego to kind of even enter there, because he'd be afraid of losing that argument right off the bat. You don't have anyone. You have a guy like Joe Rogan who just kind of like acts like, oh, really? Oh, wow.
Oh,
Even though I have him
wow.
on record. Wow. Yeah. I
Wow.
mean,
What?
Exactly. Right. Very good. I love it. And I have him on record from back in 2009, I believe there was some show he did, and it was about transhumanism. And boy, was he ever smart, John. Unless he was reading all of his lines, and then afterward they switched it and erased it from his brain. But you would never believe that he did that show 15 years ago, and here he is having conversations as if he knows nothing. So it's all just an act, right? So these
Actors,
people they're
actors,
acting.
actors. They're all,
Just
not all,
yeah.
but most of them are actors.
Right. And this is where the straw man thing fits, right? Because the straw man is acting, the straw man construct. And this is why I call straw man politics, because, and we talked about at the beginning, how I said about, I was watching the Zelensky thing, right? And there's two issues here. One of them I love that you brought up, which was that, there was kind of a PR catastrophe the day before with the Epstein files, right? And then they switched quickly on a dime and brought in Zelensky, and they had a great moment, show business moment, which Trump even then announced, saying this is great television. And they made him out to be Trump's little bitch boy, and you bad boy, you're not going to get those weapons, you better give us what we want, and I'm all about the deal. And here we were back in The Apprentice, and now Zelensky was one of the apprentices, and Donald was in his very well-to-do, good used to role as the the mentor, giving him reading him the riot act. And all the while, you set up two polarities. One of those polarities was the pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian factions, the wokers, the rainbow flaggers, and all that. And on the other hand, you had those hardcore people that were like trying to finally Trump's someone finally a president of the United States said something that needed to be said to this little megalomaniac, right? And so you've got two polarities fighting over what? Over the straw man, because the real issue here is that Zelensky is one of the most corrupt individuals that has ever entered the world political stage, and it's shameful for this man to even have 5 minutes, let alone 5 seconds, in the White House in his little stupid outfit and his little act, that he's someone that, and meanwhile he's the kind of guy
Another
that
actor.
and he's an actor. He's an actor,
Another
right?
actor.
Yeah, he's another actor. So here we've got this actor in the White House, and in his back, in his dirty carpet, under the carpet in the closet, he's executing people, for standing in the way of his political career, having hit squads and stuff sent out into international territory and performing hits against people which could be a threat to him, and nobody's talking about that at all. Right. So this is the real reality, and the straw man is the play that we were subjected to in that single moment. So the global political stage is just a form of Hollywood where these fictions are invented. And I have when I did my workshop on the weekend, I have a slide where I tell people this, and I show them how you have this idea that that Trump wants to make a deal, so he gets his hands on the mineral rights in the Ukraine, which is full of them, so that they can pay something back to those good old American people, those taxpayers, those you poor taxpayers, which fronted $150 billion to this maniac to fight a war and kill people and dismember people and rob them of their livelihood and their housing and everything and displace them. You gave them, now we're going to get that back with the mineral rights. But what's really going on here is, if he gets them to deal with him and give them mineral rights, them Americans are going to move in. They're going to change the environment. And I make reference to a 2022 slick video that was produced by the vice president of the Ukraine, put up on his Twitter channel, that was proclaiming Ukraine to be the first great reset country on the planet. And the video runs for like 3 or 4 minutes, where AI this and AI that, and it's going to be great. And it looks like Disneyland in the background. Everything's going to be new. They're going to have domes, over the whole country to protect against evil, Putin missiles which might come in.
The new Israel, huh?
Yeah. But you realize it was running it was running for years already. So what we saw play out in the White House on that day was just another little act in the Hollywood script and the fictions that they're presenting to us. And people buy it because they're, as we now see, they're all zoned out, man. Half the country's zoned out on drugs, right? So they can't perceive reality. They don't have the balls to stand up and go, we need to be sovereign people. We need to get our sovereignty back, right? And the Epstein thing. Like, what was that all about, right?
Well, that was such a. First of all, you had this strange delay because Epstein, for the MAGA crowd, that's a big one. Like Epstein was one of the biggest things that they wanted out, and they were touting the JFK files and maybe even 9/11. And I mean, yeah, that people want to see that, but whatever. But Epstein is current. That's this generation and the last 30 years of extreme some extreme conglomerate of very evil people that were surrounding Epstein. So you had this announcement that finally there's going to be a release, and then there was only the first part of the release. And what do? They invite some, uh, I would say very controlled, whether they know it or not, influencers. They're hardcore MAGA. They invite them to the White House. They give them this folder. They do a photo op in front of the White House that was cringy. Everyone holding up this folder. So then all day I'm like, has anyone uploaded it yet? Can I see this? So I see this shit's redacted. And then we start comparing it to the files that we already have and that have been out there for years. So those were just the files that had already been out there, only now redacted. So you go, wow. And this caused a huge backlash within hours in the MAGA crowd and the truth or alternative media sphere. And so then, like clockwork, because it was such a backlash, the next day you had the Oval Office thing fully staged, like perfect primetime television, shouting match in the Oval, 100% certain to get the attention of every media outlet in the world. You had a story for a week at least. What's with Epstein? We forgot about Epstein once again, like it has happened tens of times now. Still don't know, and that is what. And the thing is, why, right? Why is there a politics of theatrics like we've never seen before? Fast paced, strung together, because you need to string people along until you get them to the destination. That's the idea. So you have to zone out, you have to step back and finally pull your energy out of that believing in those folks, believing in that system. Forget the players. The players don't matter as much. They're just being exchanged as needed. The system itself is your energy runs it. Your belief in it keeps it alive. When you pull back and say, what can I do? How can I contribute to my own sovereignty, my own freedom, and that of my family and friends? Now, when that happens on a significant level, that thing collapses all on its own because there's no energy to sustain it. And I think, Frank, I don't know if you see that, but this might be the last political cycle where the fringe that is still within the system, the fringe was fooled for the last time. I feel it's like I can't see how beyond the Trump there could be any other psyop that would work on them. At least I hope so. What do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that because I had that in my notes. That was something I wanted to mention.
Of course you did, and we didn't compare notes, friends. We did, as always.
I mean, it's like the thing is we've experienced this pendulum swing. Now it's like it's been happening for hundreds of years, literally. And it's just now with technocracy, it's just moving faster. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because we can't now be sure any longer that this pendulum will ever swing back, because it's moving so fast and the technology is so dangerous that we really, if we don't now take a step back, take a breath and a breather and get a grip on what reality really is, really may be the last. Actually, you know what? You were talking about sovereignty. I was going to read this. I had this book about sovereignty, and I read a passage on the quartet. I'll read it to you here too, because it's really actually quite interesting, right? It says, and this is like, these words couldn't be truer than ever, right? It says, humanity now needs to reclaim its sovereignty. Humanity has been living within its social self for too long. What have we been talking about, right? And now social self enhanced with pharmaceutical drugs on top of it. It is the false personality that, like a game character, navigates the body through life. Yet humanity has come to over-identify with this artificial construct. That's the simulation, right? Through entrapment within this lesser self, humanity has lost contact, communication with the greater self. It is within the lesser self that manipulation comes easily. People are vulnerable to external influence and control. People are thus submissive to power. In order to understand human sovereignty, it's first necessary to understand what external power is and how it is used to wield influence and control. This is what we're doing on a show like this all the time, right? When external forms of power are understood, we're trying to decode them here, put some light on them. When external forms are understood, then internal government can be recognized, and internal empowerment, I beg your pardon on that one, can be recognized and brought forth. It is time to move into the greater self to reclaim it. Humanity needs now to reclaim its sovereignty. Only in this way will humanity step into its rightful future. The new world awaits a new sovereign human being. It's time to own your sovereignty. I mean, they're basic words, okay? Nothing like, out of the, hard to sort of fathom. But when you read that and when you see it again and again, you realize that these are the issues that are at stake here. People need to understand what is sovereignty. And it doesn't mean that just because you live in the United States where there's something called a constitution that supposedly honors the sovereignty of every single individual, that you're living in a state where sovereignty is being realized, right? Because if you're all fogged in by whatever mind-altering substance you're doing and you're not looking at reality and asking those hard questions and getting uncomfortable things out there, then you really will swing on that pendulum. You'll swing off the cliff and probably land in the ocean, right?
I love that whoever wrote this, what you just read, who wrote this, by the way?
Caleb Seth Pearl, which I'm told might be a pseudonym, but that's the book. And if you want to check it out, it's just called Own Your Sovereignty, right? Let me see if I can get there. Own Your Sovereignty, yeah. I mean, it's good to read books like this. It's easy to read, big print, right? Not even hard to sort of follow, but very, very interesting. Because it's just really, I think we need to reiterate some of these ideas on a regular basis to influence ourselves with positive messages. Tanya and I were just doing another course that we had somebody recommended to us, and it was a 14-hour sort of a deconstruct of your own inner negative thought patterns and how to turn them around. Because what we don't realize, and he's absolutely right, the person leading this course, is that on a theta level, we put messages out with our brains, and our brains have the capacity to transmit those frequencies and those vibrations out there. And if we're always sort of like in this complete like fog, then we're not going to have any definition. We'll just be like victims. We'll act like victims and we'll reflect that back out there. But what it's saying is that if you focus your thoughts on a goal, and you first of all figure out why you're here and what you want to do, and what is your, what do you want to achieve? And even it might just be something as simple as, I want to be happy. I don't want to have to worry about my livelihood. I want to be in a great relationship. I want to have a great relationship with my children, or I want to be mega wealthy. It doesn't really matter. All these things are focused beams that you can put your brain waves onto as a task, and your brain will put that out, and others that reflect that resonance will bring it back into your life. And so if that's really true, okay, and a lot of these courses are almost annoying because they're so obvious and they make you feel like, damn, I'm falling into that same old negative trap like many people are. But it's good to remind yourself of that, because it's an exercise in understanding how far has my ego developed lately. And has my ego gotten the better of me lately, or is it time to screw it back a little bit and throttle it down and get back to the ground and be grounded?
It's so beautifully that you say that, because this is a thing that no matter how aware you think you are, especially if you're surfing in the sphere that we're surfing constantly and pulling this knowledge out and connecting the dots, you need to have those times of self-reflection and recalibrating, reharmonizing. I mean, it's a sort of a trick of the trade, if you will. It's much easier if you're not in this information sphere and you just do your thing and you're in your garden or whatever you do. But if you're in the sphere, even more so than others. And there's a thing about what you said about the goals or a vision. Our work has been driven by the same vision for 15 plus years. I don't every day say what that vision is, but everything that we do moves towards it, in whatever way we feel inspired to move into. Every piece, it's a piece of that vision. And that vision is not trying to push anything on society, but helping people rediscover that. And I think in America, we have one advantage, that the motto of this nation is freedom and independence. Okay, that's the what runs in its blood, at least communication wise. But how can a nation be free and independent if its people aren't free and independent? So here's the buried lead is that if we want to define ourselves as a nation for now, maybe in the future we won't need to, but for now, and we define ourselves as a free and independent nation, we must be in our smallest, in the individual form, and the family as the smallest component of society, and the most important one, by the way, we must be free and independent. If we can do that, and that is the inspiring movement, we truly are a free and independent nation, and guess what? We'll help create a free and independent world. I mean, it's as simple like these things, about the sovereignty, which you just shared. The truth is never complicated. Deception is complicated. It's hard to decipher. It's convoluted. It's secrecy. It's occult. But the truth is simple, and it never hides. It's only our willingness to see the truth that can be absent. The truth can never be absent.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, really it's just a perceptional thing where, perceptual thing where we are, if you're like just leaving aside any opiates, right? Just your simple, sober person is subjected, first of all, when you navigate through life as a child, you go through the educational system, whatever form that takes, and you learn how to fit into the system. And if you are in a society that treasures sovereignty, at some point in education, they will move past the basics of like, look, if you want to function, it's good to get kind of your basics. But after that, if you're secure, teaches you how to explore some of the greater self aspects, which are talked about in that quote, because that's really where we should be kind of striving for the greater self. We should never be striving for mediocrity, right? And so if you're stuck in that, the fear of moving past mediocrity because you might fall on your face, that's probably one of the first reasons people start taking the opiates in the first place, right? But it's like to numb yourself from the fear of falling or the fear of pain. And these things have to be understood as important aspects to being human. That's one thing that separates us from AI, in which AI will therefore, that's why I do not believe AI will ever be sentient like a human being. You can teach them whatever you want. You can have 1,000 AIs from different perspectives. But if an AI doesn't die, if an AI doesn't feel real pain the way a human does, physical pain, emotional pain, right? And not just, pain on a level of like, you insult somebody and you see that it hurts them, but the emotional pain of understanding a greater realm of activity in your life that you can summarize and you reflect back on, reflecting back on something and going, my God, the kind of pain that I may have influenced people there with by being ignorant, by being egotistical, by being narcissistic. Wow, that kind of pain, right? That's the kind of pain that makes you, if you realize that as a human being, and you can benefit from it, you'll have a mega, evolution. You'll evolve into totally different dimensions of thought, right? And dimensions don't have to be in really another dimension altogether. They can be thought dimensionality. There's different qualities of thoughts. There's different levels of thinking that you can reach. And so, I think it's not that difficult to advance yourself as humanity if we support each other and we forgive each other and we help each other make like we understand, okay, they've made a mistake, you made a mistake. If there's kind of a quid pro quo, kind of a apology to some extent, or like whatever form it takes. But if there is that feeling of quid pro quo, that nobody's out to get the other, to get an advantage over the other, to lie to somebody else, I think that's when society will make some major leaps. And I think we're still not there yet, because we still have an element of society, a very prevalent element, which thrives on betrayal, which thrives on, just misinformation, which thrives on confusion and chaos, and of course the resulting fear. So these are the first places we need to start cleaning up. But if we're not talking about the greater self, and we're not talking about that aspect of artificial intelligence, then we're being again led into the straw man world. The world where, all these things that have been placed up as being important, they don't have any relevance really at all to the evolution of humanity. But because they've got us focused on them, we think that suddenly they're important. Just like Zelensky getting it, in the office at the White House seemed important, right, to those people, and on both sides of the fence, right? Even though it had no importance whatsoever, we've given those constructs importance, and they're completely artificial. So, that's what it comes down to.
I think your beautiful sort of analysis of the importance of, as humans, to go through the various emotions that we go through in this life, and acknowledge them, feel them, and then transcend them too, and how the promise of technology is really, and because we're at the height of multi-generational trauma, I mean, you can't underestimate. We had the two world wars, we had numerous genocides in the 20th century, and some of the greatest atrocities all on every continent, right? It was a full-on attack. And so we have now reached beyond the third generation of multi-generational trauma, which now makes it institutionalized in us, right? So if you know how trauma works, and the AI promises that we won't have to heal that or transmute that any longer, that we will be simply infused or changed from outside, so that we will never have to experience such suffering again, and even live an eternal life, and all these promises. But I can tell you the power of repentance, and I don't mean the religious repentance, but repentance really means you first feel the pain of your own decisions and actions. You feel it, even if it affected someone else. But as soon as you realize it's affected someone else, you feel the pain, because you're a human being and you didn't want that, but you did it. And so now you feel that pain. That is the first step of repentance. And then when you feel that pain, you realize your errors and you want to correct them. And that's where the change of heart and change of mind comes, the real repentance. Now you're willing to move forward in a better way. That is your healing, and potentially helps with their healing. That is the human leap, the quantum leap in consciousness that we simply need to go through, everyone on individually and then together. And then we don't need that freaking artificial solution, which will be fatal. It'll be fatal for us as a species, for our consciousness. That, of course, they don't tell us. And so I so appreciate the words that you just shared, because they're at the center of everything. They're like the core truth of what we need to realize here. Thank you, brother. It's
Well,
powerful.
yeah, no, yeah, happy to. I mean, like the word I coined for on the quartet was organic intelligence, as opposed to artificial intelligence. And the thing is here, we don't have a hard drive we can back it up on, John. Right? If we screw up and you step out in front of a car tomorrow, like boom, there goes all that accumulated, like John Nolan-ness, right? And the world has lost that. It can't go to the backup drive. It can't reload the program and put it up again. It's gone. It's precious. You're precious, and everyone in the world has to recognize how precious every single one of us is. We aren't back upable. Okay. We put things out into the field. I've talked a lot about that. We put the stuff into the field and we draw it from the field, right? These are biohardware processes, which we've had built into the amazing analog bodies we have, the pineal gland, the, hippocampus, all these great things we've talked about. Right, that they offer a certain connectivity, but at the same time, look, people say they've taken up contact with their deceased relatives, right? Well, are they sitting in the room with you now and sharing a drink or a conversation? No. I mean, listen, the conversations between those people that are lucky enough to have them, there's shows on Netflix about it, they're fleeting and vague. I mean, come on, this is where it's at. Here, this here right now, this destination that we're at, here's where the real action happens. Whatever happens beyond there, we can only speculate. We have a fleeting glimpse of it. We have lots of theories about it. But, the fact that life here is fleeting and is precious, and we can actually make amazing things happen, that is not really being celebrated in the transhumanist model. And that's something nobody's talking about that. I mean, it's like why is nobody on discussion panels out there on the mainstream where where they've got some experts from some Peter Thielite or Elon Muskite sitting there, some protege, sounding fancy, but they don't have anyone that's kind of up to the lingo of what they're into, but also bringing in the elements of the organic intelligence. And we stand to lose that. And that's the pendulum swing in another sense that you're describing as well.
For me, it's, and that we might differ on the language on this, but even in my observation of this being sort of a construct or a copy of an artificial world, if you will, my conclusion is that while we're in it, we have to live as authentically, organically as we can and connect to the original intelligence of everything, because only that will allow us to ultimately fully reconnect to that beyond this realm. So there's no other solution than being your best possible self. Do what you can with what you have where you are, and excel. Strive for excellence. You don't have to do a million things, but the two things that you do, strive for excellence and see the beauty in that and experience the joy of it, and the joy you bring others, by being and doing that. These are such simple but things that we have lost, and that I hopefully, that our conversations are really about that. You think they're about just exposing the truth or showing what technocracy would. No, they're really about the contrast of seeing this only looks good if you don't know what this really is. Once you realize what this pureness, naturalness, the goodness, the divinity is, this looks pretty primitive. It looks pretty shitty, this technology thing and this artificial intelligence. It looks very, very small, but now it's being shown to us as the greatest thing ever, as the leap in human evolution. It's my hope every single day that we find the right words, that we find the right frequency for those who are still on the fence, and go explore what's in here, explore your creativity, explore your joy, explore your kindness, explore your love, explore your compassion, and see what it does to you and the world. It's beautiful what that does. I mean, you travel a lot, you meet a lot of people. A kind interaction with a stranger, I mean, that can make your whole day, sometimes even make your whole week. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I happen all the time. You never underestimate the ability to strike up a spontaneous and fascinating conversation with a complete stranger that you might encounter out there in the world, right? As much as there are a lot of zombies out there, again, it's a frequency thing. I'm totally convinced if your mind and your brain and your thinking, you are what or you attract what you think about the most, is one of those famous sayings, right? Well, I mean, if you're thinking about the potential of the human beings to connect and to network and to reach this other level of divine intelligence, which the Gnostics talked about, then you're going to attract, the random people that reflect that idea when you're out there. So the person that you strike up the conversation is not going to be one of those zombies, right? There could be a lot of zombies all around, but it's just that one person out of a total blue that you connect, that just happens to be the one. And isn't it interesting that word monogenes, right, which the Gnostics talked about, has two meanings, right? The church has it as only begotten, which we know what that means, right? Controlled opposition. There's someone greater than us, in this case, the divine, Jesus, whatever, that's going to save the world. Again, the savior redemption, concept. And yet monogenes can also be translated neutrally, and it gets translated into the word singularity. And how fascinating that word singularity is also used by the AI crowd to represent the moment, the event horizon, when artificial intelligence supposedly reaches sentience, right? So isn't that interesting, those two contrasts?
Copy, right? It's always copying the real thing, or
Copying the real thing, mimetic stuff, right?
because they cannot. I can't drive this home enough. They have no creation power of their own. This inverted consciousness does not have it. So it can only look at the real thing, study it, observe it, and use real consciousness, you out there, to create it for them by putting this copy image in your mind, by letting you, or leading you to the path where you don't look at the real thing, but you look at this copy thing, and using your co-creative power and your consciousness to bring it about. That's the name of the game. When you're outside of it, looking in it, it's so clear, but when you're in it, and we all are often in it, I mean, all of us,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah,
have to remind yourself over and over, they're using us,
yes.
and we have to withdraw our consent and our energy from that. We can observe it, we can be aware of it, but not participate in the creation of it. And boom, That's the key. That's the name of the game, and we focus on the real thing. We focus on the real thing, and it's
Yep.
it's beauty unfolding in front of us, man. I love. I'm thankful for these conversations because I think we enter sort of the sphere and we spiral each other up, Frank. I mean, it's just
I
uh,
didn't think we were going to go in this direction today either, but yeah, it's cool. I love it. I love it.
Frank's
I
always
mean, it's
like,
like
I prepare all these slides and then the
me
conversation.
too.
Sorry, brother. Where did we veer off course, and what do you feel is important beyond this to share today? I mean,
Oh,
I
I don't know. I just it's funny here. I'll just show one that. Well, let me just show three things which I think represent the straw man world, the construct, the fake world that people have adopted from three different generations, right? So the first one is this one, right? This is the back, 100 years ago. You've got Woodrow Wilson, right, on the left, right? He was elected on the promise, what, to keep the United States out of the First World War. Of course, we know how that went, right? The other one in the picture is Lyndon B. Johnson. He promised to keep the United States out of Vietnam. Well, we know how that went, right? Then you have George W. Bush. He promised there would be none of the wars America would get into would be long and protracted. They would all be swift, quick wars with an exit strategy. Well, we know how that went. And then we have Obama, who ended up getting the Nobel Peace Prize for dropping, I think the figure is something like 90,000 bombs on average a day during his entire presidency.
he got
Right?
it preemptively. He got it preemptively. He got it before he was, I think, before he was even inaugurated.
Right, exactly. Okay, here's the next one, right? Here's a guy, he's called Harvey Barnard, Dr. Harvey Barnard, right? What did he invent? He invented something called the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, Nazara. And that spinned and spiraled off into Nazara, Jazara, and it was going to be, then there was this chick called the Dove of Oneness who began broadcasting that the assets are going to be released, and somehow they managed to sort of insert it into even the minutes, I think, of the government of the United States, so that people actually thought it was serious. Then he wrote a book, and it was called what? Draining the Swamp. So,
That
well, anyway,
that's one of the greatest psyops, Hopium psyops, Nasara Jasar. It's incredible.
one of the greatest psyops ever, right? And right on its heels, of course, we have the next one, right, which was the Q movement, right, where you have all these like cryptic, things coming out, that they're proclaiming that there's going to be, we're taking, like, here's a quote, my fellow Americans, over the course of the next several days, you will undoubtedly realize that we are taking back our great country. On the POTUS's order, we have initiated certain fail-safes that shall safeguard the public from the primary fallout, which is slated to occur on the 1103, the arrest announcement of Mr. Podesta back then because of the whole child molesting thing, right? Well, did that happen? No, it didn't happen either. It was another one. And then right on the heels of that, of course, came one of the best psyops ever. This one, right, where you had a great Hollywood scene where a guy, President, not yet President Trump, shows up at the top of these stairs with his gorgeous wife. And there's all these people holding up signs, in the grassroots movement. And guess what? Well, they later figured out that all those people standing up there were were hired by a casting agency called the Extra Mile Casting Agency, and they were all paid $50 to come and stand there with their little green signs. And as you see in the picture there, you see the photo, the
To
cameras
mimic the
all set up.
Simpsons scene, to mimic the Simpsons scene from the Simpsons cartoon that predicted this, by the way.
Exactly. So here, the all of it has come out since, which proves that it's just a total charade. It's just Hollywood, and people, it's using, and this is something that I talked about with the archons. The archons use our energy, and you hit it on it before. It's like they mimic everything good, and they turn it on its head. So they use the power of hope, which is what I started talking about today in our conversation. Hope is something that's given to us, that gives us the courage and the drive to make something better, that of a shitty situation that we have going in the world. And it gives us the the ability to get up and to organize and to feel motivated. I'll put one more thing up, which I thought was interesting because I was looking at James Corbett, and he has an excellent quote. He says, what differentiates the Q Hopium from the Doge Hopium is that given that AI is advancing rapidly and the Doge armies and transhuman technologies are closer than ever to implementation, there might not be time to wait for another swing of the pendulum. There you go, John. I wanted to add that because you said that exact line. So that brings it full circle. So we have to be very careful here what we're moving into, and we have to be on vigilant like never before to recognize the difference between hope and hopium.
Between hope and hopium, some beautiful things you put out there, Frank, today. I think making a dent, in putting another marker on in this journey that we can look back at later and go, this is what pre-paved the way. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the information. I won't apologize that the conversation goes where it goes, because I believe we're both not deciding from our ego where it goes. We're allowing it to go where it needs to go. And that usually is exactly what needs to happen. But I want to thank you for it, because it's a co-creation, and I so appreciate those. It's like co-writing a song or something. It's beautiful.
It is like jamming, kind
Yeah.
of. It's like jamming on a psychological level,
Yeah.
on a philosophical level, right?
Well, there's no one quite like you to do it with. I'll be honest. And the cool thing is, like we always say, we don't talk for weeks or even a month or so, and then we land on and do the show, and we've literally have very similar remarks and notes what we want to talk about, and then even sometimes the exact same thing. Okay, we're pretty connected, brother. I love that.
That is true, man. And the thing is, the truth really should lead everyone. Everyone has their path, toward finding it. And therefore, it's important to let everyone go their way and everyone try to find it. And we should all be able to come back together, compare notes, and find the commonalities and everything, so that we can find, where the truth is. Because I do believe in the truth. There is a truth. I don't believe that truth is relative. I think that's one of those trick things that are put out there to justify a lot of people getting away with manipulative and narcissistic behavior. There is a truth, and the truth has to do with honesty. I think somebody asked me that recently and said, well, how can you know about truth? And it's like, well, it's very easy. Like if I have some information that somebody gave me and I think it's important to give it to you, the truth is I give that information exactly to you the way I received the information. The difference between that and manipulation is that I would start to insert elements of the story that benefit me from that story of information that I was given, and I'd pass along a version of the truth to you, which is manipulative in my advantage. That's the difference. And if we are passing information to other people, we should try to strive for levels of integrity, so that we try to be as accurate as possible. And the fact that we maybe aren't as accurate as we can be is the measure of how much forgiveness we have for each other when we stumble on something, and when we encounter a bit of that truth echoing back at us that reminds us of the original version of the truth. And we should let go of the fiction and embrace the real truth. And I think that's kind of a big problem for a lot of people that are invested in sort of the fiction. But maybe that's another one of those building blocks that we need in society to reach kind of the next level of humanity.
Perfectly put. Nothing is as challenging as you confronting your own biases. And how long have they influenced your ability to look at new information, because you believe in something so strongly, and there's new information, but you can't comprehend it because that belief, that bias, everybody on one level or another has that
Yeah.
experience. So no one is immune from that.
No.
It's a part of being human. It's just, okay, there's a process going on, and then you allow yourself to look at that new information. You allow yourself, okay, I was wrong on this, and now I move on with greater understanding. But that's powerful. That to me is being authentic, and also sort of a sign of wisdom if you can do it. And we all struggle with that. There's no one I know that is all knowing and knows the truth about everything. It just doesn't exist. So yeah, brother, thank you for the 10th show here of The Naked Truth, for all that you bring on all levels, and for all your contributions to this consciousness leap that we're, hopefully going through. Thank you.
Thank you, bro. Look forward to the next time.
Yes, sir. And Inspire Tribe, thank you for joining us again here on The Naked Truth. We love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.